Something is happening behind the scenes involving Brennan Sorsby that could completely change the future plans of the Miami Dolphins quarterback group, and honestly, the timing couldn't be more explosive. What seemed like just another college eligibility issue is suddenly turning into a situation that could force several NFL teams into a bidding war, and Miami is right in the middle of the conversation. The scary part? Some people in the league believe Sorsby has the talent to be a future franchise quarterback, while others think risking valuable draft picks on him could be a huge mistake. And now, after the latest NCAA decision, the pressure is mounting rapidly because the Dolphins may soon have to decide whether they are willing to gamble on potential, or give up and risk seeing another team steal a promising quarterback with enormous potential right in front of them. But before revealing the details, be sure to like this post if you truly believe the Miami Dolphins are building something special for the future. And I want all the optimistic Dolphins fans in the comments to write, "The future is turquoise and orange," because these fans still believe great things are coming. And what I'm about to say might divide many people's opinions on what Miami should do next. The newest update is that Brennan Sorsby has officially been denied eligibility for 2026 by the NCAA after the investigation connected to gambling activity during his time as a college athlete. This changes everything because, according to the information discussed, the fastest path for Sorsby to continue playing at the college level is now basically gone. The only remaining option would involve taking the legal route and trying to overturn the ruling through the courts, but the timeline becomes extremely complicated. And with June 30th becoming a critical deadline regarding the supplemental draft decision, there is enormous pressure building around what he will do next. What makes this story so important for Dolphins fans is that Miami was already connected to Brennan Sorsby earlier in May. Albert Breer linked the Dolphins as one of the teams that could potentially make a bid on him if he enters the supplemental draft. That connection is now becoming far more serious because the chances of Sorsby actually entering the supplemental draft suddenly look much higher than before. And honestly, this is where things become controversial among the fan base. Some Dolphins fans are already wondering if Miami should aggressively pursue him, while others believe the team should stay far away from risking future draft capital. But the reality is that Sorsby is not being viewed as some random developmental quarterback. The discussion around him is much bigger than that. According to the breakdown in the report, there are evaluators who believe Sorsby could have been viewed as a late first-round or early second-round quarterback prospect if all the off-field questions never happened. That is why teams are paying attention. And when you start looking deeper into his profile, you begin to understand why this conversation refuses to go away. Sorsby reportedly has strong arm talent, very good mobility, legitimate quarterback size, and major improvement in decision-making over the last 2 seasons. One of the biggest strengths constantly mentioned is his ability to throw over the middle of the field, especially in intermediate areas between 10 and 19 yards. Those are the kinds of traits NFL teams obsess over when evaluating whether a quarterback can eventually transition successfully to the professional level. But this is where the Dolphins' angle becomes extremely interesting. Miami already has Malik Willis in the quarterback room, along with Quinn Ewers, Cam Miller, and Mark Gronowski on the roster. The discussion now becomes whether John Eric Sullivan would actually be willing to take the gamble on another quarterback prospect through the supplemental draft process. And remember, the supplemental draft is not a normal draft structure. Teams place bids, and if your bid wins, you lose that corresponding draft pick in the following NFL draft. That means if Miami used a second-round supplemental bid on Sorsby, they would lose that future second-round pick in 2027. That is a massive commitment. And here is where the debate inside the Dolphins community gets heated. Is Brennan Sorsby talented enough to justify sacrificing premium future draft capital? Some believe absolutely yes because of his upside and physical tools. Others believe Miami cannot afford to lose a valuable future pick, especially with projections suggesting the 2027 draft class could be extremely strong. What is fascinating is that the opinion presented here evolved over time. Initially, the belief was that a 4th-round supplemental bid made sense for Miami. But after further evaluation, that position reportedly changed to a 3rd-round bid being acceptable, but absolutely nothing higher than that. And honestly, that tells you how much respect there is for Sorsby's talent despite all the uncertainty surrounding the situation. There is also another layer to this that Dolphins fans cannot ignore. If Miami brought in Sorsby as a developmental quarterback and he performed well behind the scenes, that could completely change future roster decisions and draft strategy. Suddenly, Miami could potentially focus future premium picks on elite talent at other positions instead of forcing another quarterback move later on. That possibility alone makes this conversation incredibly important. At the same time, there are teams around the league that may become very aggressive if Sorsby officially enters the supplemental draft. Teams mentioned as logical fits include organizations that already have veteran quarterbacks but still lack long-term clarity at the position. That means Miami may not even have a realistic chance if bidding escalates too high. The biggest thing Dolphins fans need to understand here is that this entire Brennan Sorsby conversation is no longer hypothetical. The denial from the NCAA created a situation where the supplemental draft now feels like the most realistic outcome, and once that happens, Miami is going to have a real decision to make. And honestly, there are multiple ways this could become a very dangerous situation for the Dolphins front office depending on how other teams value him. Because think about it for a second. The report already mentioned several franchises that could view Sorsby as an investment quarterback rather than an immediate starter. That changes everything. When a quarterback prospect has arm talent, mobility, size, and developmental upside, teams become willing to gamble much earlier than expected. Especially organizations that believe they already have enough roster talent to compete while developing a young quarterback behind the scenes. And this is why the supplemental draft process becomes so complicated. Unlike the regular NFL draft where every team gets its scheduled pick, this system forces teams to ask themselves a brutal question: how much future value are we truly willing to sacrifice? Because once you place that bid and win, there is no turning back. That future pick disappears. Now imagine the pressure on John Eric Sullivan if another quarterback-needy team suddenly throws out a second-round bid for Sorsby. Miami would instantly have to decide whether they truly believe he has franchise-level upside or whether they should stay disciplined and avoid overpaying. And let's be honest, that type of pressure creates mistakes around the league every single year when teams fall in love with quarterback potential. What makes Sorsby intriguing is that the discussion around him is not just based on projections alone. The breakdown repeatedly highlighted his growth as a passer, particularly his improvement in touchdown-to-interception ratio, quarterback rating, and his ability to operate confidently over the middle of the field. Those are traits evaluators constantly search for because throwing effectively between the hashes requires timing, confidence, anticipation, and the ability to process defensive movement quickly. And that is exactly why some people believe he could outperform expectations if he reaches the NFL. The physical tools are already there. The mobility is there. The arm strength is there. The developmental upside is clearly there. The biggest question has never really been talent. The issue is whether an NFL team is comfortable enough with the entire situation surrounding his eligibility case and gambling investigation to invest meaningful draft capital into him. For Miami specifically, this becomes even more fascinating because the quarterback room is still in a developmental phase. The Dolphins are clearly evaluating future possibilities at the position, and bringing in another young quarterback with upside could create real competition internally. But there is also risk involved because if Miami sacrifices too much future capital and Sorsby never fully develops, that decision could hurt the franchise later when they need those draft assets the most. And there's another angle here that Dolphins fans are starting to debate heavily. What if Miami waits too long? What if the